Fuck Out edition. All of your geek shit questions shall be fielded and answered. Vance, how are you, my friend?
Hey, man, how are you? You doing all right?
Doing good. Chilling. Killing. You?
Chilling. Staying home.
Yeah, staying home.
Yeah, it's been another week of driving from my house to the studio to Sputnik here, working here by myself, and then going back home. And so it's been all right. It's been good.
Yeah, it's isolation, or as most of us audio engineers like to call it, normal life.
Work. Normal. Normalcy, exactly.
So,
that's exactly right.
Obviously, the most important question here is, what are you drinking today?
Today, I am trying this out. This is a Davison Reserve. This is a local Tennessee whiskey. I poured this a little bit ago and was pretty kind of like, whoa, it's serious. And then I just got to the small print down here, which you can't really see, but it's 122 proof.
Woo!
That's a 61.27% alcohol. This is Pennington Distillery, local Davison Reserve. Davison is the county here in Nashville. So, cheers.
Yeah, that's
fucker.
Strong.
That's
Cheers,
strong. What do you got?
Cheers, fucker. You know what? I'm finishing my Casamigos tequila, and then we may switch to Scotch, but I don't know if that's a good idea or not. We'll find out.
Yeah, whatever that tequila was that I was drinking on Saturday night, I have to get a couple more bottles of that. That was amazing, and it's actually scary. I drank a lot of it and didn't even know it until I got up. I got up to walk, and that was So, but So another week here, quarantine. Everybody doing okay out there?
Yeah, I hope everybody out there is doing all right. Staying safe, staying healthy. We actually have a couple of friends who have gotten this shit, including Sturgill. So that's a bit of a bummer.
My good friend Rich Neeson, tour manager to the Stars in New York City, he got it and was hospitalized, but he's out now. But,
good.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, you know.
Yeah,
it's like a crapshoot, you know. We don't really know like how people get it or how it comes in, and so the best is just stay home and work on stuff at your house. Work on, limit your whatever it is. Limit where you go. Use your gloves. Wash your hands. Wear a mask. I've got
Puremix.
Yeah, watch Puremix. Exactly, absolutely. I've got gloves and a mask in my pocket, so
Yep, I've got bleach wipes all over the studio.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna jump in on geek shit, but you mentioned something before we got started that I wanna ask you about. You said something about a new converter, a new stereo A to D that you're.
Yeah, I did. I am an old 2192 user from way back, Universal Audio 2192. And I'm obviously a Burl devotee. I have multiple Burl motherships. But Rich Williams, the designer at Burl, and Will Kahn, who's the product manager, they had been telling me for a while that they were going to build a set of mothership cards, not exactly for me, but that I was going to like. And basically what they are, they've built a pair of 4 input cards that have the Burl transformers switchable in or out. And new op amps, it's a new design. And I got to be honest with you, I hate changing things that work really well. But I was nearing the end of a record that I'm mixing right now. And I thought, I'm just going to set it up so I can capture both in the 2192 and through the Burl at the same time. So my console has lots of mult outs, so I could do that easy. And then I have a bunch of AES inputs, so I just came in AES. And it took about 40 seconds for me to retire the 2192.
Wow.
Really, really beautiful. And the beautiful thing is I can still hit those transformer buttons and get that transformer, that burl sound if I want it, or not. I can take them out, and it's a very clean Class A path, just beautiful sounding converters. And I know our good friend Pete Lyman, I think, just got a pair of them.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm really, really happy with them.
Although I want to address what Lloyd just typed in, like, yeah, rock the Apogee, rock whatever works for you, man. Like, we're lucky to be able to check this stuff out. But it, I mean, listen to Vance's old stuff that kicks ass. That, it's not like it kicks any less ass because it went through a different converter.
No, of course not. Of course not. There was a bunch of stuff I did with 192s, back in the early 2000s that I am pretty confident I would love to be able to remix on better converters. But you know what? They were what they were when they happened, Yep. So, hey, Greg, good to see you again, man.
Hey, Greg. What's up, buddy?
Yeah. So hit us with some questions. I know we've got questions down here. Let me get to one here. So let's see. What do we got here? All right. We got a couple votes. Andy Reid, our good friend Andy Reid, would love to hear your thoughts on relationship between mixing cymbals and guitars, acoustic guitars and cymbals. What do you think, Reid?
Cymbals eat guitars.
Cymbals always eat guitars. Exactly right. I have this saying, it's terrible, and my drummer friends hate me, but I always say, cymbals are the thing that drummers hit when they run out of ideas. And that's really not exactly true. Cymbals were accents. They were made to be accents, or ride cymbals meant to, provide that 16 note or 32nd note or 8th note drive to the track. But a lot of drummers just beat the fuck out of cymbals, and that eats all your guitars up. So, it's a tough one. Acoustic guitars and cymbals, if they're recorded right, they're in different frequency range. Your guitar shouldn't be up in that cymbal range, except for the top end of the acoustics. So, I mix acoustics and record them. I use a Fatso, which kind of takes a lot of that shrill top off and sort of, tamps it down a bit. But as far as cymbals go, I don't record them with any compression. I do end up using them on the backside when I mix them. So.
Yeah, same here. I love running overheads through an 1178, but sometimes that puts a little bit too much cut or harshness in the cymbals. So Fatso is a great way to deal with it. The other thing I really love doing is bringing my own cymbals. I love super, super dark cymbals. So if you're cutting a song that's based around acoustic guitars, either take the cymbals off the drum kit, which totally prevents them from conflicting, or use really, really dark cymbals. What Vance said is it's hard sometimes to get a drummer to not bash the cymbals. A lot of people think that the harder you hit the drums, the better they sound, but the inverse is actually true. I was shocked when I did a record with Matt Chamberlain, and when I went out into the room, it sounded like he was crushing it, but when I went out into the room, he was like barely hitting stuff. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's strange. Oftentimes when drummers hit drums and they're really laying into the snare, what they're actually doing is they're actually dampening the snare or dampening the toms by hitting them so hard. It's just a weird deal. Balance with drummers is no different than balance with mix engineers. Learning how to get that balance in their playing, it takes a lot longer. Well, I don't know. I think it takes about the same time, really. But it's a tough one. That's a good question, Andy.
Well, and you know what? Somebody said that we're back to bashing on drummers, and we're not bashing on drummers.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, we're bashing on drummers who bash.
Yeah, definitely not bashing. I mean, man, there's so many great drummers out there, and I can't bash on all of them. Reid and I, sometimes we do a lot of the same stuff, and a lot of times we do totally different stuff. I do a lot of bands. I do a lot of indie rock bands. And, one of the first things I'm always saying is, hey, here, try these hi-hats, which are mine. Try this cymbal. This one isn't very bright. Try this. I'm always trying to point them into things that are going to make, the recording sound great. And, I'm not a drummer, but like Reid, I'm a drum owner. I'm a cymbal owner. I have a whole wall full of cymbals. And I tend to like cymbals that are broken. I like them when they're all messed up, But, different strokes for different folks. And as my mentor once said, one man's OMG, another man's WTF. So,
yep.
Your mileage may vary.
And I think you'll find that just like most musicians, anybody who really wants to make great stuff, if you bring something in and you say, hey, can we try this? They're generally open-minded on trying stuff. I've seen a lot of drummers get really excited that I'm going to show up as an engineer to the session with a kick drum or with snares or with cymbals and just something like they're like, oh, dude is into this. Dude wants to make this happen, instead of like, oh yeah, whatever drums you got is fine. It's a collaboration. It should always be a collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times drummers will come in and they'll be like, man, what do you want to use? What do you want me to use? And I'll be like, well, this kick drum sounds great, or this, or maybe we want to go with this track. A lot of times drummers want to use their own drums, which is totally fine as long as they sound good. Somebody just popped up that I got to work with Vance Powell from Clutch. Fantastic drummer, amazing. We ended up using his drum kit, but we used some of my snares and some of my cymbals in certain places because, in fact, sometimes those were cool things. Somebody popped up a second ago. Oh, go ahead, Reid.
I was going to say, here's another question that says, I want to know if you tend to change drum heads during recording sessions, especially for rock. If they sound good, if it sounds good, it is good. If it doesn't sound good, then try whatever you need to do to get it to sound good. A lot of great drummers, in fact, all great drummers know how to tune their kit. If the heads are dead, they'll change them, But one of my favorite drum kits I ever recorded belonged to a friend of mine named Craig Young, and it was this beat up 60s Ludwig kit, and I don't think the heads have been changed in decades, and it sounded unbelievable. So no, I'm not changing those heads.
Yeah, no, I will change it. I'll change a head if something starts sounding wrong. I don't like new things usually. New things to me usually don't sound very good. New snare head, if the drum's dead, if the head's dead, if it's coming apart, yeah, let's change it. Toms. The big thing happens for me is I'll have different toms tuned something different. I'll have that thud, 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 or boom, boom, or bang, bang with a big bright, like a pinstripe sound or something like that. I'll have all kinds of different things because I want them to be different sounds. And I'm a big fan of tuning drums to the key of the song. A lot of people don't do that. They just are what they are. But I like them when the toms are in tune. And so that ring that happens when the drums are happening is a little, it's a little chord along with the root of the song. It's not quite, don't take it quite all that nerdy. I'm not that Del Bozio, 22 toms and each one's tuned to, 2 different octaves and all that shit. That's silliness. But yeah, it's not silly. It's just not for me. So, you know what I mean? And like somebody just probably bass strings. My bass is a 73 P bass. I think it has the original string. You know what I mean?
The best bass sounds I've ever heard is from Tommy Sims, and I don't think he's ever changed the strings on his.
James Jamerson never changed strings. Come on, never changed strings.
All right, let's go.
It's only the jazz guys who need that.
All right, Vance. I'm curious about this too. How can you explain the dual full tone tape echoes?
Yeah, actually I can. So what happened was I got this full tone tape echo, and I just really wanted it to be, like that slap echo, like a Ampex, 350 slap echo. The thing is that it just isn't quite quality enough to have that. But that's actually part of the great part. It sounds to me like a much more hi-fi version of an old Maestro Echoplex, an old tube Echoplex. The transport's better, the electronics are better, all that. And what ended up happening was once I got one and started using it, I thought to myself, if I had 2 of them, I could take and just get them just enough apart and pan them that if I put the vocal in the middle, which of course almost always do, I put the vocal in the middle, I can have this thing out here on the sides that isn't quite the same time. And so it provides a little bit of this left-right movement in your ear that sounds almost like a room. Then I said, well, if I turn my send up to it, I can overload the front side. So then suddenly what happens is now I'm overloading the preamp in the box and I'm pushing a lot to tape. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll use these two mic pre's, these crappy mic pre's I have, these ARTs, which was my return back to my desk at +4. And they have a +20 switch. They don't have a pad, they have a +20. So when I hit that +20, now the signal I'm sending to the full tone gets blown up in this mic pre, and then it comes back in my desk. And it's just a really fantastic sound for a lot of different things.
And so
that just kind of went from there.
That brings up a really good point, because, a lot of people who aren't lucky enough to get to futz around with this old vintage gear that we've got, this is something to consider. If you're in the box, right, one of the disadvantages that I find mixing in the box is that everybody puts stereo EQs, everybody puts stereo compressors. There's no variation from channel to channel. What Vance just talked about was having two separate delays with different distortion, lo-fi, rolled off low, rolled off high, just naturally from distorting it, panned outside the middle, making that variation. So when you're in the box, you can mess around with using different distortion plugs, different saturation plugs. I found that effects, even my outboard effects returned into the box, sound better when I put a little distortion on them and limit the bandwidth on like lo-fi. I'll kick it down to like 32K bandwidth. And then making sure that the stuff that you move around or that you use stereo is a little bit different. You're going to get a lot more width. You're going to get a lot more definition, and you're going to make the vocal or whatever instrument you're using that on stand out.
Yeah, man, that's absolutely the thing. I'm going to tell you guys a secret. You guys want to hear a little secret? So on the last two Chris Stapleton records, from A Room, which is RCA Studio A, Room Volume 1 and Volume 2, the vocal on Chris's vocal, the full tones on his vocal aren't full tones. They are the Pro Tools stock tape echo plugins. Two of them, one on left, one on right, mono. It's set up exactly like my full tones with an EQ after them to roll off the top. So, we mixed it on Dave's desk on his API, but we were going really fast between mixes. So I used the big API basically like a summing mixer. I taped all the faders in place, much like somebody else I know. Taped all the faders in place. And then I just used them in the box. So, I didn't use the full tones. And to be honest with you, it was pretty great. And I still, from time to time, I use that tape echo plugin, which just comes with Pro Tools. I use it all the time. Because it really sounds great.
That's not the BBD, right?
No, it's just a tape echo. It's called tape echo.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
and if you turn up the record level, you can get that overloaded front end sound.
Yeah, and if you throw on Phoenix or you throw on tape head and you throw on whatever in front of it, like you can do that too. There's no reason not to put 2 or 3 of them in front of it. Just mess around and see what it sounds like. Hey, so there's a question that's been upvoted a lot. It says, Vance, you seem to love dual ribbon mics on overheads. When the room's lively, how do you deal with the extra room sound? I'd like to hear that too.
I think the thing that I would do at that point is I would try to find the balance between the over the top. And when I mean over the top room, I don't mean like over the top, over the top. I mean like the over the top of the drum sound to the direct sound below. So what happens there is I will adjust up and down my overhead while the drummer's playing. And basically what happens at some point, inverse square law, at some point you'll get to a point where the drums are loud enough that the rest of the room that's happening on the back side of the ribbon just becomes a natural ambient. That's basically my thing, is I'll raise and lower it. And you know, and raising and lowering the overheads changes the phase relationship. So sometimes that means like I'm like I almost always have to flip my overheads out of phase to get in phase with the snare. But I've actually had a situation where the room was the inverse of being too light. It was so dead that what was happening was there was so much kick drum in the room, and the kick drum was out of phase with the overhead when I flip it out of phase. So at that point, what I had to do is I had to flip the snare drum over and leave everything else in phase. So, you know, you just have to kind of futz around with those phase buttons while you're going to tape. But I don't normally change mics. What I would probably do at that point would be maybe put some condenser spot mics closer to the cymbals, record those on another stereo track, and just if I need something closer, just gotta check the phase and see if it all works.
I've done that too. In fact, I've found that it's really cool if you get a really cool sound on your ribbons on the overheads and you want something a little bit different, go ahead and I'll put condenser microphones right on the plane of the ribbons, like right there. So I know that they're in the same phase relationship. And then not only can you go either or, but you can sneak in a little bit of like the condensers, which might give you a little more hi-fi or you know, just a slightly different sound. Sometimes it's really cool to mix the two of them. Yeah,
absolutely. I got really lucky. I accidentally recorded I accidentally mixed a record for a guy. This is really weird. That it doesn't bear repeating. I mean, he was a great guy, but part of the deal was there was no money involved. A long story, and so he had all his gear he was going to like loan me or give me, and all of the pieces of gear that he gave me, none of them were worth anything in the long run, except for this one silly Cam84 mic. It's an old one with a Tuchel. And man, I have used that thing on everything. I've used it on kick drum. I've used it on hi-hat. I've used it on electric guitar. I've used it on acoustic guitar. I've used it on everything. And I wouldn't in a million years ever just pick this KM84, but for some reason it sounds really great. And I've used it on cymbals, ride cymbal. I've used it as a mono overhead. I've used it for all kinds of things. So, you know, a ribbon isn't always what I'll use. And if I'm going to tape often, I won't use a ribbon. I'll use a condenser.
Yeah, because you lose too much of the transient stuff, right? Or just too much of the high. Yeah. No,
somebody popped up over here on the questions. I heard if you bounce drums from tape machine to tape machine, it yields goodness. I would say if you bounce drums from tape machine to tape machine, it yields lack of transient noise. If you cut the tape and transfer it to Pro Tools, you're in. If you go to Pro Tools and transfer it to tape and then back, it's always the second generation. I think you kind of lose something in that. You don't want to do a lot of bouncing to tape of drums more than one time. I've done many records with Jack White where we had 3 tracks of drums or 2 tracks of drums that had to get bounced to one. We did that one time and that was it. Never do it twice. It starts getting.
You know what? There's a question about that from Matthew. He said, how much processing do you do on those individual tracks when you're summing them together to one track?
Individual tracks, none. I will maybe EQ because they come into my console in stereo. I'll do a little bit of EQ on them on the desk. I'll hit solo and then I'll EQ a little bit. Just, you know, PFL really is what I'm saying. And then after that, once they're combined together and I get the balance I want on the desk, then I'll process a little bit of compression and maybe a little bit of final EQ after the fact. Same thing with snare drum.
Yeah, you know, I've found I was in cutting not too long ago in a great room in Ocean Way on this huge Neve console, and I got the drums sounding really good, which, you know, me sitting there in the room liking the way the drums sound is kind of rare. And I looked out over all of the preamps and I noticed that I had like 3 EQ buttons in and almost no compression.
Yeah.
Whatever works, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, Reid, that one's question. You talk about the 3 faders on your SSL, you mount your snare. What's going on there?
The 3 faders on my SSL for snare?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, when I'm mixing snare, I like to have a couple of different options. So I've actually kind of got 4 faders on the SSL for snare drum. One is just the snare drum unaffected. One is a snare drum running through a gate and then running through a Neve compressor. And it's actually the 500 series Neve compressor that's set up for compression and limiting. And it's just all pop, like all just real short, real hardcore. And then there's one running through a little bit of EQ and a distressor that's kind of in the middle. And then the third one's running through an old Innovonics. And the Innovonics 201, for whatever reason, it kind of like picks up the articulation and the ghost notes and all of that stuff. So I just blend those to taste and, you know, just try and find the snare drum sound that I like.
Yeah, that's cool. Those Innovonics, those are one of those things that are sort of out there that, like, you know, people don't really know. So now you just drove the price up on all those.
Oh, shit. All right. Well, I should grab it more.
It's all right. It's all right. I you know, I think I ruined the market for Ampex 1101s. You know.
Yeah.
So,
well, actually, I bought 300 of them, so it may have been all just me.
That's funny. Awesome.
I love those mics, actually.
Yeah, I do too, man. You know, that mic is my great in the control room during mixing with the band in here, and I'm like, hey man, there needs to be a double here. I'll just grab the 1101. Plug it into the API right on the DI port and just hand it to him and be like, just hold this mic and sing into it. And it's got such a cool sound and not a lot of low end. And I just really think it's great. So. Totally.
All right. So here's one do you do any referencing while mixing? If yes, what references at what point and how do you use them? I'll step in on that first. I use 2 different references. One is the rough mix, because at least with a lot of stuff that I work on, people have been listening to these rough mixes forever. So you have to use that to kind of get a ballpark, not only what they were thinking musically, but also like how loud shit is, right? Because if you turn it in quieter, the whole like, why don't you just turn it up? It'll be fine. Never works. Also, I like every once in a while when I need a perspective check, like I'll throw on a mix that I know or something that I like just to kind of like clear my ears out and, you know, and just snap me out of focusing on the details and back to the overall picture. How about you?
Yeah. Well, the rough mix is incredibly important. If I don't get a rough mix, I will ask for one. And, you know, sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. If we get a session and that session's in Pro Tools, I'll ask my assistant to just bounce a mix. As best they can, to bounce a rough before he breaks it out on my desk. Yeah. But sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Oftentimes I get the mix that Reid and I both love more than anything, and that's the mix that has been the rough mix has been worked on in Pro Tools for the last 4 months with the L2 on the bus. And suddenly now there's this rough mix that's the loudest thing, you know, under the fucking sun. And I think my biggest problem with that is that I think every time I see that, I just want to tell whoever it is that sent it to me they should mix it. Because, you know, maybe it sounds really great. You know, maybe it doesn't. Mine's not going to sound like that. I'm not ever going to do that. I don't ever do that, blast the mix to the nth degree so that it beats everybody's mix. I'd much rather give room to the mastering guy. I'd much rather allow there be room for that something can be changed later. So I don't really dig that. Now, that being said, I always have the rough mix on my desk here on the SSL. I have one button. I can push one button and the rough mix is on my desk playing back. So I can literally just listen to it exactly. And every now and then you come upon that thing where you go, whoa, hold it. Something's going on there that I'm missing. And that is the reason why you want to make sure that rough mix.
Yes, actually, that's key. I always want the rough mix, because there was a time when I was mixing a song and I got it done and I sent it to the client and they were like, yeah, these aren't the right guitars. So I always want to hear what they last listened to, so I know instantly, oh, something's missing. That's the wrong solo. There's no acoustic in the second verse. Like, you got to find out, because it is a horrible waste of time to turn in something and they listen to it and they're like, nope, this is totally wrong. And then you spend the rest of the time working through that feeling that they get, like, oh, that first mix wasn't right, even though it just wasn't the right instruments.
You know, one of the first gigs I got myself fired from was this, Reid will understand this, south of Cool Springs track that I was asked to mix. And the track came to me as 80 wave files, 80 individual wave files, right? So not only did I have to put the track together, and there was no rough mix, but in the folder of wave files was a text file, which of course, in the middle of 80 files in a folder, I just imported all of them into Pro Tools. Pro Tools doesn't import text files, but in there was an explanation of the arrangement of the song. No rough mix, but an explanation. So I worked about 4.5, 5 hours on this 80 track
monstrosity
song, monstrosity. And the band came by. I was doing this with Blackbird. They came by to listen, and I hit play, and it rolled for 20 seconds. And I was watching the singer, and the look on his face, he got the weirdest look on his face. And they just stopped, and they're like, I don't know what, did you read the notes? And I'm like, no, did you give me a rough mix? And he's like, no. I go, okay, well, I don't know what your notes you're talking about. So then we come find the notes. And one of the things was the singer's wife sang on it. And she sang the whole song with him. Now that to me says duet, but that was not what he wanted. And in the notes were all these details of where she was to be cut in and cut out in pieces and parts. And it just went downhill from there.
Oh, so, man, that's a total nightmare. Yeah. I had one guy send me a song one time, and they sent me a text document that listed all of the tracks and listed where they should be panned in the mix.
Oh yeah. I've seen that too.
Yeah. So I sent the document back to him and said, hey, listen, if you just write down the levels of those tracks, we'll be done. All right, another one. This one's got a ton of votes. Tell us a little about the acoustics of your recording room when you built it. Did you hire an acoustic designer, or it was DIY? I assume that's for you, Vance, so go for it.
Oh, yeah, totally DIY. I knew there was some dimensions that basically, here's the deal. I had a building that was like this size, and I knew I had to put a control room here and a tracking room here, and there was a hallway originally supposed to be in the middle that ended up not being a hallway. It ended up being a booth and an airlock, a little airlock. And so I had X amount of space. So I used graph paper, and I drafted it out at 1 square equals a foot, and basically knew that I wanted a certain depth to get the right length of frequency in my tracking room, and I wanted the tracking room to be a certain size, and not with parallel walls as much as possible, but complicated enough that I wanted it to sound more like a slightly lively living room than a really live, bright space. So I used a very hard wood on the floor, and then I used these white acoustic tiles that we had actually found for Jack White's studio. And I bought a couple thousand of those, and they were quite expensive. They were $3.80 a piece. A couple thousand of those. Yeah, I think about not quite 2,000 of them. And we used all over, hold on a second. Why Vance used this terrible microphone? Well, this terrible microphone is a set of these. So can you hear me okay, Reid?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's why I'm using it. I don't understand his speech. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Moving on.
I just thought I wanted to bring that up. It's AirPods, So I designed it to be a certain size. as big as I could possibly get, and we couldn't build the track out. We couldn't build the tracking room out any bigger because we were in a setback. So here in good guys, I'm glad. Thanks. We were in a setback situation, so we couldn't build it any bigger. So sometimes you just have to build as big as you can build. I did get 15 and a half feet above me, so that was good.
Yeah. So basically the way rooms work is anything under 200 is a function of the size of the room, and to a slighter extent, like what the walls are built out of. Anything over 200 you can treat. So, if your room is like 6 feet by 6 feet, you're going to have a tough time getting bass in it. Yep. But when you have a room, you kind of roll the dice on low end. And you can mess with that on drums with tuning or with platforms or with putting a subwoofer in the room and all of that good stuff. That's all fun. And then the rest of it is treatment. You mess with it. You put curtains in, you put tiles in, Vance has some wooden doors hanging from the ceiling that are really cool. Like you put a carpet down or you don't, you just screw with it until it sounds good. There's no gospel to it. Acoustics is a black art. The guys that I know that are best at acoustics are guys who have been doing it so long. They've been there, done that. And they have best guess.
Yeah, that's a deal. You know that certain lengths are going to work for certain frequencies. Certain things, the more complex your room is, the better your high frequency diffusion is going to be. The more trapped your room is, the better the low frequency is going to be. It's just.
Uh-oh. It looks like we lost Vance. All right. Well,
so,
cool.
Reid, while he's fixing that. Yeah. Cool.
All right. Until he comes back, I'm going to run down some of these questions. I noticed that there was kind of a
lively. I'm back. Sorry.
Oh. I was going to say, I noticed there was a lively discussion over on the side about like tuning drums or not tuning drums. It doesn't matter, whatever sounds good for the song. Yes, you can tune drums if you want to. Depends on how you're hitting the toms, depends on what kind of toms you're hitting, whatever. I get to work with a lot of great drummers. They tune drums. It always sounds amazing. I'm going to go with what they tune. I would suggest people who are working with a lot of bands, go ahead and get great at tuning drums. A friend of mine, Craig Alvin, kind of a badass engineer, he was always great at tuning drums. And he worked with a lot of indie bands, so he would go in and tune the drums. And if you can't do it, find somebody that can, because it does make a huge deal. Mike, acoustics is math, but I've been in $4 million rooms that don't sound good, and I've been in rooms that cost $150,000 that sound better than a $4 million room. So acoustics is math to the extent that music is math. Again, and I don't want to keep throwing his name. Actually, I do want to keep throwing his name around. Matt Chamberlain playing whatever math on something versus Joe Blow playing whatever math on something is completely different. When mixing an entire record, do you keep your master bus processing the same for the first and last song, or do you change it on every mix? Me personally, my master bus is generally the same for the first song, the last song, and every song in between. I'm mixing into my master bus because that's what works for me. I don't like changing it and guessing. I like being consistent. I'm used to it being consistent. So, that's what I'm doing. Oh, Vance is trying to get back in here. Yeah, Pro Tools doesn't run on the Mac like over my shoulder, but a Quantec Reverb program used to run on it, so that's why it's there. You're right, Paul. There is no perfect room. Wow.
There we go.
Oh, there he is.
Hey, there he is.
I disconnected my Ethernet cable with my foot. Sorry about that.
Here's a really interesting question. What is your favorite instrument to mix and why?
Strings.
Strings
complicated and easy. If the strings, if they're done right, they sound great, period. Yeah. And and if the arrangement's not great, they don't. I don't know. I mean, I like all kinds of complicated stuff. You know, I like instruments that I've never heard of before. You know,
what's your least favorite instrument? I'll go ahead and answer that while you're thinking. Banjo.
I don't mind it.
Banjo bugs me for whatever reason, unless Bayless.
Hey, yeah, cajon, exactly. There you go. What a dumb instrument.
Yeah, why is that there? Yeah. Hey, so we've got a question on something we both use. Seen you use the DBX 500 Disco Boom for parallel and bass pick. Yeah, love that thing. What plugin would you use for this purpose if you were to mix in the box? So, do you mind if I jump in on that? I have spent a really long time finding something that sounds like the Disco Boombox, and the honest to God truth is nothing sounds like the Disco Boombox, and I don't know why. But the closest thing that I've found is a Vox and Go plugin that does like the low frequency thing. I've tried every low frequency thing, whatever, and the Vox and Go plugin with EQs before it and after it, and a little bit of limiting, and you check the phase, is as close as I've ever found. And I will say this. I love the Disco Boombox on Snare. Just going to say.
Done it. Definitely done it. My first real experience with it was when we were doing mixing consolers. And I kind of put it on a lot of stuff. Bass, kick drum, snare drum, all the guitar solos. You know, I use it a lot. I will definitely put it on solos, on guitar solos here. Mm-hmm. I'll definitely put it on, obviously, bass all the time. Strangely, I don't put it on the kick a lot because the 500 gets a little slow and woofy. And I think that's the reason why all the plugins are wrong. The 500 makes it, you know, it makes choices based on octaves and what board is in it and all those things. So, you know, there's a 3-board version. I have one of those. There's a 2-board version. That's the one that most people have. You know, it's weird and it's slow. And that's kind of the reason why it sounds so cool to me.
Yeah, it's kind of like an LA2A. It'll let the transient through and then like do its thing, and that's what's special about
afterwards,
it.
Yeah, like the kick drum would be a boom, boom. It's slow. It's behind it. I have often on bands that don't have a drummer, but yet somehow they have or don't have a bass player, but now they've got a guitar player playing good bass, or they've got a key bass. I've used the subsynth on that quite a bit. You know. So I saw somebody while I was off there for a second in La La Land. I saw somebody talking about 2-bus mix compression. Did you talk about that?
They just said, do you keep your 2-bus the same or do you change it on every song? And generally for me, my 2-bus stays the same and there's not a ton of compression on it. So, you know, I like to mix through it because I know from experience that I'm going to end up back on it with it anyway. So why not just mix through it the whole time?
Yeah. I record with my 2500 on the 2-bus and I mix with it because I like to sort of feel like when I'm tracking, it feels like a mix to me. So I use it on both sides. It also keeps me from over compressing things, which is kind of a, you know, an interesting backwards ass way of doing it. But I don't use a lot of compression either. My 2500, I mean, if I see the 3, I turn it down. You know, if I'm hitting 3 dB, it's way too much. I'll back the threshold off. I have been a little bit lately doing a little bit of the 2500 and then my SSL stereo bus compressor in the console in my 6000. But I just make sure I never see the meter move on the SSL. It's kind of like cheating because I can hear it if I take it out. But I replace the VCAs with the VAT VCAs, the high speed ones.
THAT.
THAT, yeah.
Right.
I replaced mine. So, and I did my stereo bus fader also. So
you know what's weird? I kick my SSL compressor up, sometimes 4 dB, but when I turn it off, it doesn't change all that much. I don't know what's up with this compressor. It sounds great, but it doesn't sound like super compressed until you really smoke it. And then, it's an SSL compressor. It'll just start fucking with stuff.
yeah.
Hey, so there's a question about, can you talk more about the transformers you have hooked into your system? How do you come to use them? Well, I have, oh, nice. Might have that guy on in a minute. All right, I'll yak a little bit
Chris.
about transformers.
Yeah, I'm on my live stream here with Reid. Say hi, Reid.
Hey, Athens, what's up, baby?
Hey, can I call you back in a minute? I'll call you back. Bye.
I
knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, I know. It's Chris, right? I love transformers, and that's why we like a lot of gear. 1176's, LA2As, Fairchilds, Neves, all of that stuff is transformers. So I just started experimenting with transformers on the mix bus. Malachi, Western Electric 111Cs, they all sound really cool. They're just flavors, whatever works for you. I know a mastering engineer that's a favorite of both of us uses transformers when he masters. I'll tell you what's a killer plugin, though. The Kazrog True Iron thing sounds really, really, really
cool.
And I would definitely check that out. I use that all the time on certain things, and it sounds amazing.
I'm empty.
Yeah, we need to reload.
Yeah, we're going to reload. All right, everybody. So, hey, I'm a big Transformer fan too. I actually put Transformers in my SSL. So, I have a custom mix bus here, API-ish, and then with Lynn's red wire transformers, both on the insert send and on the buffer driver, the output. Just to get that sound. And I can tell you right now, the thing that made me do it was I was having it set up on one of my buses, the 3 stereo buses on 6K, and I mixed the record, and I was in the middle of the mix, and we did this work on the weekend, and then I had the mix up with the mix on my 2-bus playback, and I could just play the mix currently and then play the 2-bus. And then I switched buses to the API bus, and it was just
sick,
so much better. I literally had to recall the whole record and print the whole record again. It was just so much better, and I never looked back. So,
which means you care, because it's crazy to get a record done, and I know you've done this, and I've done this too, and be happy with it, and then say, you know what, it can be better. Hey,
hey, we got a special guest today, ladies and gentlemen. The other Reid Shippen.
No, it's the other White Pete. I'm the other White Pete.
Yeah, the other White Pete. Yeah.
Hey, Pete.
That's way better. Way better. What are you doing? Hey, Pete. What are you doing today?
Working on the new Fish record.
Oh.
Whoa.
Hey, Pete, who mixed that record?
Some beardo named Vance Powell. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, just doing.
Are you? I think. Are you cutting vinyl lacquers today, or vinyl?
We're cutting reference acetates. So just did some test cuts. It sounds awesome. And
cool.
Yeah, after this thing, I'll cut the refs, and then we'll cut the masters. Get those off. It might be a little while until they figure out who's going to press it, but
right.
We're in progress.
I've got one little note for you, by the way. There's one song for the vinyl I want you to shave a little low end off.
Got it.
I'll talk to you about it.
Just one thing.
Pete, we were just talking about using transformers on your mix. So can you speak to that? Ooh.
Well, just pulling some shit out of the closet here. So there's a novelty-sized bottle of Macallan.
Nice. Turn your lights up.
Okay, hold on.
You're dark. Oh,
that's even worse, huh? There we go.
Wow.
So, well, got some UTCs there, some other goodies hiding in the desk.
What you got behind you?
Right here.
Trace Beardo.
Woo!
Malatkis.
And some Telefunkins and some Neumanns and some UTCs ready to start messing with.
Now, are all these transformers one-to-one transformers? These are all isolation transformers?
The UTCs are 2-to-1, I think. Sort of. Yeah. Yep. So it's fun, but I'm a big fan of the fan of the UTC transformers. I use those on a lot of stuff. So
are you using these in an insert loop?
Yeah, I use them. Typically, I'll put a set of transformers first thing in the mastering chain if I feel like it needs it. So hits the transformers and then everything else after that.
Right. How do you make up gain or adjust gain going to them or from them?
On the mastering console and in the DAW.
Oh,
so
does the mastering console have gain you can adjust?
Oh yeah, I've got that. Oh. I'll give you a little. Let's see if I can figure out a way to give a little quick tour of the console here. So yeah, I use an MTC1. So this is the input section. So I've got basically 10 plus minus 10 dB there, and plus minus 10 dB on the output. So yeah, and then a whole bunch of other fun toys here. The Burl. There's hopefully you can see it. The new mothership there.
So did you happen to hear that I just switched mine to those?
Yeah, I heard you mention that. They're amazing, right? Yeah. It's, I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. Even longer Burl user, I believe.
Yeah, you got. No, 2012.
Yeah,
2012.
The new cards are absolutely amazing. I mean, the AG is a completely different beast.
I have a suggestion. Since you all got these, when we can, wouldn't it be fun to just run a part of a mix through Lavery, 2192, Old Burl, New Burl, Neve, Crane Song, whatever, and we can just throw them up on my website, and everybody can just listen to the difference?
Yeah, well, we've already done that here with an experiment last year when we were testing ADs, but we can definitely add a bunch. We have so many converters in this building, so we can definitely add a bunch more examples to that.
Yeah, for sure.
That'd be fun.
It's weird. I was the other end of it. I really love the 29.2, and then I just didn't want to hear anything else as a 2 mix forever. So it's kind of one of those things. Now, Rich sent me these over to check out, and it took 20 minutes, and I was, retiring the 2192s.
Yeah, to be completely honest, when they sent me the unit to evaluate, I was scared to evaluate it because I was worried I wasn't going to like it, and I didn't want to have to bum them out because I was going to be super honest with them, and there were a few suggestions I had ergonomically that I want them to maybe tweak, but I was blown away. I mean, I thought there are a couple other ADs that I really like, and this thing has taken its place. Generally, I use it with the transformers out. That's kind of been my jam. I use so many other transformers in my chain. I don't need another set of transformers.
Yeah, same here. I've been using the A to D as a transformer out, but then the D to A to D is with the transformer out. The D to A is a transformer in.
Yeah, it's cool to have that option on the DAC.
Yeah.
Here's something we should talk about. There's a lot of questions. What are the differences between Burls and HDXs and the Lynxes and all this stuff? And you know what? The bottom line on all of this is pretty much right now, all converters sound good. There was a time when they didn't sound good. Now all converters sound good. When we're talking about this is better than that and this is better than that, we're in the rarefied air of the top 1% of this, because everybody that's on screen right now is working really, really hard to be 1% better today than they were yesterday. But if you're just making music, a great song with shitty converters is way better than a shitty song with great converters any day. So we have to keep that in mind.
Agreed. The only caveat is I think when it comes to mastering, I think a 4% difference when it gets to this stage is massive. That's why I've spent the last year and a half meticulously shooting out converters, and I have a lot of converters in here, and I use them as different flavor palettes. So
Right.
my console's set up so I can feed the console with 3 different DACs, and I can capture currently with 2 different ADCs. And I like that flexibility. I mean, this is a game of inches. Like when I get a mix from you guys and it's 98% there and we're just adding the final polish, that subtle difference in a DAC might be all it needs.
Well, it's the same thing as when we're doing EQ. We can be doing anything from 2 to 15 dB. When you're doing EQ on masters, what are you doing?
Usually under half a dB, sometimes tenths of a dB,
right.
sometimes
so it's all scale.
But it depends. It depends on what the song needs. I mean, sometimes 5 dB. that's rare. That's a couple times a year, but it really depends on what the mix needs.
Yeah. By the way, it's snowing in Nashville right now. So, like, what the hell is going on?
You're not being serious, are you?
I'm being serious.
Awesome.
All right. Hey, here's another really, really great question. A lot of us love music and audio. Any tips, personal or otherwise, to stay motivated during this difficult time? I think that's a really great question. Personally, the thing that I've found works, and I struggle with being consistent about this, but everybody I know that's really successful does the same thing. Get up early, meditate, tell yourself that you're good, you know what you're doing, look at your goals, do a little bit of exercise, drink some water, like start your day correctly. That's the best way to stay motivated. And if you don't have work, then you come in and you work on something else to make yourself better or try new things. I remember Michael Brower always talked about like trying out stuff and then putting it in a pocket, and he would have this thing that he could come back to. You discover stuff and you can keep coming back to it. Vance, what do you do to stay motivated?
I think for me, it's probably the thing I do to keep motivated is waking up every morning. I'm old, so waking up is kind of a shock every morning when I wake up. No, honestly, it's trying to sort of just, separate myself from the business. I spent the last 30 years living, breathing every single thing about building a career. And only really in the last couple of years that I actually said, hey, I'm going to take weekends off. And so weekends off are for family, for friends, now it's a little hard, but actually it's not, because, we were all on the Friday night Zoom. Wow. We have a bunch of great friends in the industry that we have a little Zoom conference, and we set up late and we drank like we did with friends, and we partied and talked about what the fuck we were doing sitting at home. And, so for me, like, staying motivated is just, I love going to work on Monday morning, and I love getting done at 6:30 or 7 or something like that, and going home and cooking dinner and hanging out with Diana and hanging out with Tia sometimes when my daughter's there. And weekends we have a pool, and you guys have been there. We have a great space to chill and just go out in the backyard and enjoy the sun. And and every time I think that I'm sick of whatever it is the fuck that I'm doing, the people who have been to the studio know this, but behind my studio is a fucking graveyard. So you want to get motivated? Go stand around out back.
Yeah.
I just walk out there and I'm like, hey, I'm above ground, and
it's a good day.
It's a good day. It's raining, it's shitty, it's snowing, the sun's out. I don't give a shit. I'm in to enjoy it. So for me, that's the thing that motivates me down the pike. And it's especially now with all this, it's hard to get motivated, because I think all of us have seen, our schedules being busy. We're busy, but I can't expect this to continue if this continues. So it's a tough one. And doing these kind of things like this, either Zoom or Puremix or watching my friends do their thing, it's just awesome. And it's the way to stay connected and stay motivated.
It's the Nashville
And listen to
community.
music. You know, I tend to listen at home. I've got a couple crazy radio stations. I've turned Pete onto them. I've turned Reid onto them. A couple crazy radio stations I just listen to, and that, you know, makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Pete, how do you stay motivated?
You know, I mean, I try to maintain a schedule. Cheers. You know,
Cheers, fuckers.
Cheers, fuckers.
I feel I think like a lot of people going through this crazy situation, it goes in waves. Sometimes I wake up and I feel just the weight of the world on me. Then other days I feel strangely optimistic. And more so now I wake up feeling optimistic. And I just, you know, I feel like I'm doing this for my family. So they keep me motivated, and I feel very fortunate to be able to have a career and do what I absolutely love to do. I can't think of a better job. So coming into work every day and getting to listen to my favorite artists' new records before anyone else gets to hear them is
amazing.
Ever, you know?
Hey, you want to hack for that, by the way? The last thing that you put in your mind at the end of the day is the first thing that you're going to think of when you wake up. So if you want to have a great day, get into the habit of right before you go to bed, putting in a positive thought, putting in like, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to kick ass today. I'm going to have fun today. And then you'll wake up positive. Hey, there's two questions that I want to address. And Pete, I mean, you're a recording engineer from way back, so you'll get this too. How important is time alignment for drums? Is it necessary? And what's your procedure on checking phases on a drum set? So I think we need to kind of talk real quick about that.
Sure.
And yeah. I will start by saying like phase or polarity on the interrelated mics on a drum kit, especially when mixing, is the difference between a great drum sound and a shitty drum sound. And if you don't believe me, pull up the overheads, pull up the kick drum, and mess with polarity. One will be killer and one will suck. And the only time you're going to get into a problem is when somebody cuts drums where like the kick's in but the snare's out, and when the snare's in then the kick's out, and all of that stuff. That's I
think that's everything I've ever recorded, by the way.
Well, yeah, me too. But as far as time alignment goes, like there's a plugin called Auto Align, and every once in a while I screw around with it, and it never really seems to make a difference versus me just like checking phase on everything. But when you're cutting drums, man, the first thing you do, pull up your overheads, pull up your kick drum, check the polarity of the kick drum, pull it down, pull up the
snare drum for me.
Yeah.
See, I do it with the snare drum because the kick drum. Okay, so see, this is where Reid and I are probably different. The kick drum is not important to me so much in the overhead. The snare drum is. The snare drum to me, that difference between the snare drum going boom and it going pap is in the overhead, is overhead.
Sure.
So
I like both.
So yeah, I like them both too. The thing that I'll fuck with the phase more is the room and the kick drum.
Yeah.
Because if the snare somehow is out of phase with the room, I don't really care.
Right.
I don't want the room to accentuate that, but I do want the snare in the overhead. So the other thing that happens is often I have to futz with the top floor mic. Now I tend to use the bottom and top floor because it's the one drum that you really need both heads to be mic'd up. The bottom is very important. And sometimes the bottom will need to be the tone of the drum. The top will just be the stick. The bottom, is ringing. It's a resonant head. So I found that when you flip the top floor tom, I flip them both at once. Often I'll find that it's better out of phase than in phase with the overhead. Sometimes it's better in phase and out of phase with the snare. It's all just, timing relationships. But every time I've ever tried something that lined the transients up, it hasn't worked for me. I know it works for people, but it doesn't work for me.
I don't see the reason for it, but also, you know, we all have the opportunity, or we have the advantage of having done this a million times. So we probably are placing microphones in a way that wouldn't benefit from that. I don't know. You know, I do know that if it sounds good, it is good. And that if you don't check polarity on your drum kit, you're screwing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I start my drum kit getting sounds with the overhead.
Me too.
I get the overhead first. And actually, what's funny is that's not exactly true. I'll get the room first just so I can hear the drummer talking to me. But I'll bring that up first and then turn it down. And then I'll do the overhead with that turned down. It's because I can hear the drummer. And then I'll be like, okay, cool, just play. I don't ever say, okay, give me just the kick drum. Give me just the snare drum. Give me just the rack toms or anything. I just play, man. Play the track. And then I'll just kind of find that balance on the desk.
You know, somebody just said, does the polarity on the kick or snare kill the vibe if it's pulling the speaker inward instead of outward? Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. It's more like, are the waves lining up and augmenting each other, or are they canceling each other out? That is really what we're talking about as far as polarity goes. And you have to keep in mind, like, you can sit there and measure shit and dick with it for days. And, you know, like, we know guys that have done that and gotten amazing drum sounds. You have to balance something sounding good and keeping the vibe on the session and making sure the band is ready to rock. If you spend 4 hours getting drum sounds, the drummer's going to hate you and no one's going to be motivated. So you kind of have to find a balance in there somewhere.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. If most of the drum sound is the overhead, then, you know, getting a really great kick drum or getting a real snare drum is less important, I would say. But if that's not where you're going, then the kick and the snare have to really sound great, and the overheads have to sound great. I mean, you know, it all has to sound great. But I have definitely mixed a few records where the room mic, the kick drum, I have low passed at 100, and then the snare drum, you know, is just in there a little bit for the thump, and it's just the room and the overhead, and, you know, maybe the front mic if I have a mic up front or something. You know, it's just, you know, one of the things.
So I'm curious, we've got Pete Lyman on here, super badass mastering engineer. Pete, what are some of the biggest problems that you run into on stuff that you're working on? And like, how could we tell these guys to look out for that stuff?
Well, it's coming from you guys, no problems, of course.
I know that's
right.
Not true.
Yeah, you like that? I mean, honestly, I think there's a couple pretty common mistakes that I receive. One of them would be from folks that are mixing in a room that has obvious issues, and they end up mixing into a brick wall limiter. And, you know, it's like the ref thing you guys were talking about earlier. Sometimes I get mixes that are louder than I would want to master them. Now, I have absolutely zero issues with people using brick wall limiters on their mix. I have no problems with it. If that's your thing, if that's the thing and you're good at it, then do it. I mixed something for a big mixer that was mentioned earlier that mixes into a limiter, and the mix was perfect last week. And it was great. But I would say if you're, you know, once you mix into a limiter, and if it's coming in and it's insanely hot, that leaves us very little room to work with. That's an issue. The biggest issue, honestly, is people are bouncing their mixes and they're not listening to them before they send them to mastering. So they get here and they have dropouts, or, you know, there's, I can hear them emptying their recycle bin and it's sneaking through on the mix.
Right, and that's the mastering guy's fault, right?
Yes.
They didn't check it, it's the mastering guy's fault. That is a really good point. Like, if you're bouncing in Pro Tools, once you bounce it, hey, it's 4 minutes of your life. Listen back to the mix and be sure.
Yeah, listen to it. I mean, it's easy. Listen to the mixes. I can't tell you how many times I mix a record and someone comes back and says, man, the mastering's perfect, but we decided to raise the guitars a dB on every song. It's like, okay, well, you're going to be paying to redo that whole record. So I think that there's sort of a misconception when it gets to this point that we're making Pop-Tarts. It's like, oh, I'll just send you a new mix and you'll just spit it out, right? It's like, well, it takes me the same amount of time to rerun a mix essentially almost as it does doing it from scratch. So listen to your mixes. Make sure you're happy with them. If you're not happy with the mix you're sending to mastering, more than likely you're not going to be happy when you get it back from mastering.
Right.
That's the rule. I think in general, if you want to think about it as a letter grade, you know, we're going to bring that mix up a full letter grade, maybe a letter grade and a half. But if you send through a mix that's a D-, don't expect an A sounding mix to come back from mastering. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Listen,
hey, somebody posted something. Toy Town posted something that I think is kind of interesting in a metaphysical sort of way, and that was, I appreciate every day is a school day and in life generally, but when did you guys realize this is me? Like, do you guys remember the day where you went, oh wow, that sounds like me? Because I know for a fact I can't do anybody else but me, and that I hear things completely different than a lot of people. You guys know, I mean, Jakir King is one of our closest friends. He's just, I mean, I think he's just one of the greatest recording engineers on the planet. And I love him to death. I love everything he does. And there's no fucking way I could ever do anything that sounds like what he does. Now, you know, George Massenberg's the same way. It's hard for me sometimes to like even keep going in this when I hear some of George's old records and some of Jakir's current records, and people are just doing so much good work. And then, you know, it's weird to like be on a forum like this and have people love what you do, because it's just weird sometimes. So, I mean, how Reid do you, and how Pete, how when people are asking you, like, when did you know, hey, this is what I do and this is me and that sounds like me? You know,
I'll say this briefly, this is not to contradict what you just said. I hope that it never sounds like me. I hope that it sounds like the artist, right? I hope that it sounds like what the artist wanted. And I've been really fortunate to work on a really crazy array of stuff from, you know, like India.Arie to the London Symphony Orchestra to country to pop to rock, you know, and I really want it to sound like what the artist wants to sound like. I want it to sound like the best version of the artist, right? I listen to a record for 7 to 10 days. They listen to it for the rest of their life. Like, I hope that what I'm doing enhances their vision in a way that really, you know, makes them happy. Like that's what I want. And people tell me that things sound like me, and that's cool. I guess, but I don't hear it. I don't identify with that. Pete?
See, here's where I'll come back to you. All those people asked you to mix their record. They didn't ask you to do it because you're a technician. There's
True.
no difference than if they ask somebody, Bukovac, to play guitar on it, or if they ask Steve Miller to play guitar on it. They're asking for that sound. So I see what you're saying, but that's actually, I would say to you, not true. They want your sound.
That's entirely possible. But, you know, I mean, I want to make sure that I'm serving the artist. I see mixing as a service industry. I want to make sure that I'm serving the song. You know,
well, of course, that's what we all want.
Right. And I know you know this, and we've all run into this. Sometimes, I mean, for me, mixing, and I know for you, because
I've done it. I know what you're saying.
Right? Like, mixing's about an emotional response. And sometimes I've done better mixes that don't sound as good. I've done mixes that sound good, and you put the faders back down and you do it in 10 minutes and it feels good, and that's the right mix.
Done it.
Yep.
Done it. Just did that on a record that's not out yet. It'll be out coming up sometime. You know, I worked for 2 hours on a mix to get to a point where I had built a fucking house of cards, and I just had to pull the bottom one out and turn everything off, kill the automation, and then turn everything back up to a balance. And strangely was all the things that I had worked on, I made all of them better. I just didn't make the mix better. But then putting the mix back together, it all went back together. 20 minutes later, it was printed, approved by the artist. So yeah, that happened.
You know, Pete, I want to point this at you. This question a couple of times from a mixer perspective. Do you print a loud version for the client?
Oh yeah,
and then simultaneously print one for mastering a dB or two down? Let me clear this up, at least with what I do. I mix it. I pay zero attention to what the level is. People talk about LUFS. I say LUFU. I don't care what the level is. I mix it till it feels good, right? But when it goes out, I put a little. Yeah, here you go. I put a little bit of. I actually use isotope and just the mastering, the maximizer version of it. I put a little bit of level on it, no EQ, no multiband, no nothing, just to make sure it's in the ballpark of what they're listening to on a rough mix or on something that would be a regular release. Because I know mastering is going to amp it up, but you want to have them comparing apples to apples as much as you can. Pete.
Sure. Yeah, I think where we run into problems, and Vance sort of alluded to this earlier, is when someone takes ozone or fab filter or whatever and adds 8 dB of gain to their mix, and clients are approving something that's insanely loud that just isn't going to translate, isn't going to sound good. And oftentimes, as a mastering engineer, we're chasing that. And sometimes we have to we're actually almost making a record sound worse to chase the level or sound of one song that people want. Or if you're a mixing engineer, you get a rough that's that loud and the band is trying to chase the sound of the rough and they don't understand. And that happens all the time. So, people need to understand that level isn't quality.
Yeah. So, can we speak to this for a second? Yeah, this is a human reaction. If you went to a stereo store and they want you to buy a certain pair of speakers, they make those speakers a half dB louder than the other speakers you're listening to, and you'll pick them. Humans pick things that are louder more often. And one thing that really kind of was revelatory to me is there's a guy named, I don't forget his name. He has a place called Mastering the Mix. He makes a plugin called Reference. And what it does is it lets you listen to your mix and the mastered mix and the rough mix and everything all at the same relative level. And it really gives you an interesting perspective on what's better versus what's louder. Because as a human, we're always going to pick louder as better. That's just the way it works. And the volume wars have been here since the jukebox, and they will never go away, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
You know what Andrew told me once? He said somebody should give him the golden square wave because he won that battle.
Oh, he won. There's no beating him. But
I don't know, man. Dave Fridman came correct with that Slater-Kinney record, man. That thing was fucking crushed.
Actually, I take that back. Sheps has been beat. I've had a couple mixes. I won't say who, but that have come across the desk recently that are, almost pretty much full scale.
Let's throw this out. This is something you've had experience with. The new Sturgill record used super high mix levels on purpose to make a vibe. Tell us about that, because you mastered that not only in stereo but also in 5.1.
Yeah, that was an unusual record because it was crushed. Everything was hitting the red continuously. Going through the SSL, hitting the red and Lavery golds. And then in mastering, Sturgill insisted on laying it back to half-inch tape. So at first I was like, shit, it's going to sound like mud. And he was right. It sounded awesome. So we took those crazy loud mixes, hit tape, and then hit the desk really hard. And then that's what you're hearing. They were good, solid mixes to begin with. And that record was agonized over. It was basically remixed 3 or 4 times before. It was mastered twice. And because it was remixed in the middle of that process. That's a unique record, though. That record is just supposed to sound like that. That's it. That's part of the deal.
Well, some records definitely. we've all gone down that path. I mean, you know, the Jack White record I did, Blunderbuss, we absolutely, positively, purposely went the exact opposite direction. No 2-bus limiting, no elevated level, nothing. It was from tape, direct transfer. Bob Ludwig went direct transfer to another tape machine while mastering. And then that tape was the final master. And it was, you know, edited sequence on tape, printed from tape. That's as close as you're going to get. I mean, strangely, it's one of those things. That's the closest you're going to get to a person's vision of a record that everybody gets to hear as any other. I'm not saying that that's the best way to go about it. I'm just saying that's how we did it. I do the thing where I print my mixes off my console at around 0, which is +4, into the converters, which are at -18. So that tells you what you need to know there. And then I print an L2, add 7 dB with just a limiter on at 0.01. And that's what I call the heated. I never deliver the heated to the artist except in 44:116. That's it. Never high res, even though I print them.
Heated except for an MP3, MP4. But when it goes to
me too, originally.
Also.
Yeah. But I do, I like right now, the record I'm mixing currently, I delivered 44:116s of those heated just so they can put it in their car, make CDs, whatever they want to do to listen to mixes, because we're going to do the sequence here in a little bit. So, you know, but I never ever desire, now Pete and I are going to talk about this in a minute, I never desire that to be the final product. Strangely, that has become the final product a couple times.
Yep.
When the artist decides that that's what they want the record to sound like.
Yep.
And you know, okay, I know that the L2 on the master isn't really doing a lot of limiting because I see it when it prints. So, you know, it has happened before.
Pete knows this. My heated mixes are what, a dB louder?
Not even
louder, not even.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, mine are 7. So
I gotta throw this question out here because this is awesome. I recall Bob Katz saying that baseball caps produce a 2K notch in the sound. Is that true? I think it's more like 1.73, 1.74K. Pete, what do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of funny. I have to admit, though, that I do, when I master, I take the hat off. So I still got a little bit of hair left, you know? So
yeah.
When I'm, you know, I wear a hat all the time, but when I'm critically listening, I do take it off because I do hear a difference. But
yeah, I take the stocking cap off too because it covers the ears and it does weird things to the high end.
Yeah, but I think so, if you keep your hat on and you're just used to hearing everything like that, then it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're always wearing your hat, keep your hat on. You know.
You know, Pete, you can keep your hat on with me.
Hell yeah, just the hat. Yeah, let's keep in mind that
I gotta tell you guys,
waxing poetic over the fact that putting NS10s on the meter bridge of an SSL console causes all kinds of disgusting audio artifacts, and who can actually mix a record like that? And then we listen to every single Bob fucking Clear Mountain mix that kicks ass ever, and it's like that. So it's really what you're used to, and you know, and Bob Katz just needs to find better things to talk about.
Yeah, he's got better things to talk about. Hey, so back in my former career as a live sound engineer at Clare Brothers, we actually did have to have hats for ringing out wedges with hat acts. So because the hat would in fact reflect into the microphone and cause feedback. So yes, now I never did any of those tours, but I know people who did, and the hat was important. So I don't wear a hat every day. I mean, I'm as bald as any of these other guys. But you know, I'm wearing my hat as a particular statement at the moment. And I've been wearing my hat, you know, every day for the last 3.5 years or so. And but I'd like to not wear a hat. You know, it'd be great. So
My head
I
gets
know. Yeah, my head gets cold too.
Hey, we should say this. Look, we're not burning bobcats. I mean, I'm sure if you went ahead and measured it, you would see changes wearing a ball cap, wearing a Stetson, wearing like whatever. Anything that gets around your ears or around your head is going to mess with, and comb filtering, head-related transfer function, all of that stuff.
Anything in the room makes a difference.
Right. Is it going to make a difference enough that you're going to change something? Nah, probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, some of us in this room are old. Like I'm 55. I don't know that I really could tell a difference between my hat or no hat. I take it off sometimes. I leave it on sometimes. But I don't ever go, oh, I really can't mix this record because I'm wearing a hat.
Well, I'm half your age and I still wear my hat.
The main reason because I'm not mixing loud enough that it would matter.
What?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that? Hey, out of curiosity, what level are you guys metering at? Pete, I know you keep a meter on your desk.
Yeah, I when I'm EQing, I listen pretty loud, between 88 and 90, C-weighted slow. Not for long periods. When I print back pretty quiet. Just so I can just listen to make sure nothing funny is happening. But most of my EQ decisions are made in that kind of 87 to 90 dB range. C-weighted.
Yeah.
C-weighted.
Yeah, C-weighted, yeah.
I mean, I
think I have an Avocet and I used a Sharpie on it and put little dots in. Okay, so like don't go beyond this point.
Yeah.
Which sometimes when tracking, and I put the big speakers up, I want more because I'm an old live sound guy, 100, 102, something in there is pretty rock and roll. But these days, yeah, I mean 75, probably final balances. I'm probably even close to 69 or 70, way down there. Let me put it this way: my tape echoes in the back of the room are louder than the mix.
Yep. Chris Athens was actually the guy who told me, he's like, the lower you listen, the better the bass.
Yep.
Okay, I'll take that. Hey, guys,
on your monitor.
Go ahead, Pete.
I think that depends on your environment, your monitors, and what you're used to.
Sure.
I mean, my PMCs are really flat, throughout that spectrum. But for me, being an old rock and roll guy, when I'm doing the EQ, I want to feel excited about it. So I'm not listening for 40 minutes at 90 decibels, but I'm up there for a couple minutes while I'm making EQ decisions and then back down. I mean, just like Vance, I don't have it marked, but my console's all stepped, so I know what 90 is and I know what 85 is. So
fascinating. If we could put a meter in everybody's studio for a day of work and have it actually show us the data on how we listen, I think that would be fascinating. Well, if anyone out there knows how to do that, let's do that.
Yeah, get one on your iPhone. I use one on my. I use an.
If you have a black Series 4 watch, it tracks your volume over the day.
Oh, there you go. Awesome.
Yeah,
hey, there's a bunch of questions here that I want to sprint through. Okay. So can we just do a quick sprint, like quick answers? Do you think Q&A's Luna will be
speed round?
Yeah, speed round. Will Luna be a game changer?
Yes.
I just mastered the first song in Luna today that I think will be coming out. And I mean, I don't know if it's any top secret. I guess I don't know if I can say who mixed it, but it sounds absolutely beautiful.
Did it rhyme with Wakir Wing?
It sort of did.
Yeah, okay.
It is, pardon my language, it is fucking gorgeous. It is an unbelievable track by an artist that I love anyways. But Jakir is a goddamn genius.
Yeah, he is. He's fucking.
I agree.
Talking to Vance earlier about it. It is unbelievable. Like, especially with, I mean, he's good at everything, but especially with really organic instrumentation. It is, sounds fantastic.
All right, next question. Do you tend to change drum heads during recording? For me personally, you know, the drummer, if he decides he needs new heads, he puts them on. If he doesn't, it's great. If they sound dead and we don't want them to sound dead, then I'll say change them. Otherwise, we just rock and roll.
Yes, 100%. Only change them if they sound bad or wrong.
Next question. When do you decide how heavily to lean on the click track? Well, you know what? It's music dependent, man. I've done records where everything's on a click, and I just recently produced a record where 3 out of 15 songs were to the click.
Yeah, a lot of records I've done have no click. I would only lean on the click if it's a band and I know that I'm going to need to edit the drums later.
Or if there's prelay, like if somebody's worked up something before, you know, and you want it to, yeah. Hey, another really good trick is it's okay to feed the drummer a click and no one else.
Only.
Yeah.
I have my Q system set up that way. Yeah, I have two Q head boxes, and the drummer gets a different Q than the other side.
Some of these are pretty complicated. Like, how do you align parallel compressors for drums and vocals? I think maybe we can come back to that.
We can do that another tech. Matter of fact, if you want to know how I do it, in my Puremix video for Tyler Bryan, I talk about it.
Oh, there you go. Let's see. Would you prefer one or different drum sets for an album recording? Whatever works. As far as I do, a lot of times we do hybrids. Like I have a Slingerland kick, and I'll have an A&F snare, and you know, like whatever toms work, Ludwig toms. It doesn't matter. I change snares on almost every song. Yeah, me too. And most of the time, it's my snare. You?
Yep, most of the time. Somewhat.
All right, Pete, what should I be looking for when shopping for converters? Is it a color thing, or is there more to it? Color versus cost, right?
Yeah, I mean, personally, from a mastering standpoint, I'm looking for the least amount of color possible. It's sort of subjective, but I want a pretty transparent converter at this point, especially when it comes to the DAC. So I want the soundstage to sound wide without being artificial. I know there's a lot of DACs out there that kind of do this artificial hi-fi thing, and I won't name any names, but not a fan. So I mean, some of the DACs that I really like I mentioned earlier, I love the new Burl stuff. The Crane Song Solaris is fantastic. I have 2 of those as well. The Prism stuff is really great. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff out there, but you're right. You can get so much bang for your buck right now. I mean, the Link stuff is great. You know, even like on a budget, the new Apollo stuff sounds really good too. Depends on.
Yeah, it does sound good. The Apollo X, the converter is quite nich. Yeah. All right, what's our next one? Keep going.
Do you master for CD level, or do you master for online, or somewhere in between?
It's sort of a we're mastering for basically full scale digital level. To my knowledge, people ask about it all the time. No one's doing separate, no majors at least are doing separate masters for Spotify and YouTube and everything else. That's not a thing, and it's not a thing that's needed. Just make the track sound good. Quit worrying about LUFU and get to work.
Yeah, Vance, a couple people have talked about Cooper Time cubes. Can you want to talk about those? I can say personally, you turned me on to it. It's one of my favorite guitar things. It just makes things larger.
It's the best.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, I use them as a send on my desk, and then I blend them back into the mix. Just spreads guitars out really nice. The funny thing is the UAD plugin is actually pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's good.
As something to plug in. You just can't run it full wet. You just kind of crank it down to 15, 20%. But it's really nice. Feels nice. I actually, you know what's cool about mine, whether it did or not? Mine is from Record Plant Sausalito. So I always think like Rumors, Tusk, all those records that were done there probably somehow went through that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I think the UAD Cooper Time Cube is great. I love it on background vocals. I
still
end up going to the physical one for guitars. I don't know why. Maybe it's just
guitars,
whatever. But
whatever. Guitars and keys, mono keyboards.
Yeah,
Super thank
absolutely. If you had to choose one clone microphone, regardless of price, what would you choose?
Ooh. Okay. So this comes with zero endorsement. I have been really blown away by the Peluso mics. We have a pair of Peluso 47s here, and Trey, Anastasio, and the Fish guys have a couple of the 67s. And I got to be honest with you, man, I'd probably buy the 67s even over the reissue 67, even though that's really, really good. But those mics are awesome. The one that's really killing me is the Chandler Red, which isn't a clone mic, because it's a microphone and the preamp. I bought 2 of them. Trey bought 2 of them. I have a bunch of people who I've been working with who's like, yes, we have to have that. The Chandler Red, REDD, and the Chandler TG. All these mics. I'm not an endorsee. I'm not getting shit for free. These are fucking awesome microphones.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Chandler stuff kicks ass, and I've also had really good results with the Upton 251. I thought he did. Yeah. Let's see what else. Why do you print the mix on another computer? Cause
I don't.
Hey Pete, do you put limiters in serial, taking a little off with each?
From time to time, but not necessarily. I've done it before with digital limiters and it works, but I get a lot of my volume out of gain staging through the console. So honestly, I would say 90% of the masters you hear that have come through my desk have a max of a dB.5 of digital limiting on them. Almost everything is analog gain, and I use very little compression.
Well, then you can speak to this. It says, what's the importance of proper gain staging when using today's analog modeled plug-in processors? Why don't you speak to both?
It's all about gain staging. It's all about gain staging. Like if I have a very specific way that I run my console. So for instance, when we're setting up a job, my assistant knows the exact level I want to hit my console, and I know the sweet spot for all my gear. That's super important. I mean, you don't want to be jamming too much signal into another piece of gear and overloading and saturating that piece of gear, unless that's a specific effect you're going for. And I think if you follow this general, like, good practice analog gain staging tip through digital, everything's going to sound a lot better. And I think one of the reasons why for years there was such a backlash against digital audio was because people were abusing it. The Pro Tools the meters in Pro Tools are very misleading. And if you're peaking at red, like for instance, if you're tracking a guitar and you're peaking at red in Pro Tools, you're possibly overloading. I mean, you guys know this. You're overloading all of the gear going before you even hit the converters.
Yeah,
depending on the headroom of that gear. So I think gain staging is everything.
Do you use dither at all?
Yeah, I use the same dither when I need to do SRC. I use Power 3 dither. I don't make a fuss about it. I listened to dithers once about 5 years ago, and I use the same dither for everything that needs to be dithered, and I move on with my day.
I use analog gear. It makes noise. That's dither.
Yeah.
I often press through my half-inch. It makes tape noise, which I call God's dither.
Yeah.
Hey, one thing. Let me throw something back. Somebody asked about printing on a separate machine. The only reason to do that is if you want to capture 96K tracks without upsampling your mix. What I do is I upsample everything to 96K.
All of my mix
everything.
I capture everything on a separate system at high res. So if I get 44.1, it goes in 88.2. If I get 48, it's printing 96K.
Yeah. So I 96K for everything. You'd be surprised how many tracks still come to me at 44.24.
Yep, I get a lot of tracks too.
Yeah. Matthias, yes, I've tried the Cascade Fatheads. They sound really good for the price. Everything's relative. I love Coles. I love RCAs. Royers work too. Like, again, if it sounds good, it is good.
Yeah. You know what's weird? Somebody asked me, you know when you found a sweet spot? It's weird. I will find a sweet spot for something, and that piece of gear will just end up over here, Pat's doing one thing all the time. It doesn't always work that way, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just experience. I've used everything on everything, and you end up finding the same thing works all the time, and that's what it ends up being. Yeah. Vance, somebody wants to hear about your pedal insert chain.
Okay. Well, basically what I've got going on is I've got 2 radial XTCs. Okay, there's more than that, but there's 2 radial XTCs, which are 500 series input-output, +4 in, -10 out. And that ends up over here on this wall right here. So way up there at the top. Hold on, up there at the top. And then now once they're at the top, I can connect them to things like over there's the Telray delay. And then way over here, hold on, I don't want to disconnect my Ethernet cable again. There's a vibrato scanner, and up there on the top there's some other effects. Underneath all those is another patch point where I can patch in all kinds of plus or -10 devices. And so I've got all kinds of that going on. I use this as a send off my desk. It's aux 4 on my console, returns on a pair of channels, and I can plug anything in. So.
Yep. Same. That's the great thing. I keep a shelf of, on top of this rack, there's just like 30 guitar pedals. And anytime you feel inspired to try something, just run it out through the radio, run it through a guitar pedal, see what happens.
Hey,
Pete,
I have good news. I have good news for us. Our guest next week will be the one and only Josh Thomas.
Yeah.
From Rupert Neve Design.
Yes.
So Josh is going to be on. He's going to talk about his time at Rupert Neve Design, and he's going to talk. Or actually, that's actually not true. Coming up, Josh Thomas will be. We have one more before that. Josh Thomas from Rupert Neve Design will be on here soon. So
yeah, and
we've got a bunch of people lined up.
It goes without saying that Josh has been working with Rupert for, I think, over 10 or 15 years, and Rupert has forgotten more about audio than any of us and all of us will ever know.
I have the greatest Rupert Neve recording ever. I was down there and I started asking some questions, and he went on this long conversation about what Rupert did during the war. And maybe someday I can, release it, but it's pretty awesome. I didn't know what Rupert Neve did during the war, but I have it. I recorded it on my phone, and pretty great.
Okay, somebody actually said that the coronavirus loves beards, and do you have evidence of the opposite? I haven't gotten it. Have you guys gotten it?
I haven't gotten it.
I've got it a few times, actually. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm storing it in my beard over here, and
right down here.
Over here. Yeah. This is I've isolated the coronavirus in my beard.
I don't know if you noticed, but my beard was a lot larger last week, and because I discovered coronavirus in it, I cut that part out.
Yeah.
Vance, love your drum sounds. How much of the sound is helped out by the white wall tiles? And does anyone make that 3 tiles?
Yeah. So the white wall tiles are an Armstrong drop-in one by one ceiling tile that have been custom drilled by a guy with a CNC drill, with a router, basically CNC router. I really just like the way they sound. They're very neutral. They kind of capture high mid frequencies while also reflecting them. So it's kind of a half and half sort of thing. They're a common tile. If you look around on the internet, you'll probably find a guy who does them. He does this pattern, which he calls a square pattern, and he does a pattern called random. And the random pattern is actually what I would love to have half of these, but I didn't. I just got all. And RCA Studio B those are not the same tiles. The ones in RCA Studio B are actually like sun. They're asbestos. They just can't take them off.
So I'm going to go ahead and hazard a guess that Tiles on the Wall are great, and Tiles on the Wall with a Buster drummer versus Chris Powell in the trunk of a car. Chris Powell is always going to win. It doesn't really matter what tiles are on the wall of your drum room. Although, if you're working at home, I will say one of my least favorite drum sounds is drywall.
Well, I would say you're right, unless it's the right room. Because like Paul Worley's old room over here, remember the Money Pit?
Yeah.
That was drywall and plywood, and it sounded.
That's right. That did sound great. Yeah, you know what? I mean, there's, all bets are off, right? If it sounds good, it is.
Yeah, if it sounds good, it is good.
All right. Have you guys used any of the virtual microphone systems?
No.
No, because I have actual microphones.
Yes, I have. I have
dragons on them.
No, I've used the what is it? The Thompson? Is that what it's called? No. Yeah, I've used that one, but I used the mic. I didn't use the virtual part of it, and it was a good sounding microphone. It wasn't bad.
Hey, so I like totally offended Pete the other day when I said, like, how can you create depth in a mix when you're mastering, or you can't create depth in a mix? And he was like, fuck you, dude, I can totally do that. So let's talk about that, because someone was talking about gaining depth in a mix. So Vance, let's us talk about doing it on the mixing side, and let Pete talk about doing it on the mastering side.
I think that what you would have to do. Hold on, I'm answering. Neotech. I think whenever you're Neotech, yep. Someone asked what these were.
Yeah, those are great.
I think what you do is you have to find a way to not put everything. This is hard for me, by the way, to put everything, plastered on the grill cloth. I like it when things are plastered on the grill cloth. I really do. And sometimes you can kind of put everything there, and then there's that one thing that lives back in the background. There's a great Bob Clearmountain mix that I love, and we talked about it last week on Woodface. The whole record has this beautiful vocals are right here. All the vocals are they're right there, and the guitars are a mile out here in space. And it's just so awesome how, even though the guitars are loud, they're so out here in this wet reverb world, and the vocals are right up front. I just love that, man. Just such a great thing. And I try all the time that record is Woodface. Any song on Woodface. But I think the one is, hold on a second here, let me look. The one that I really love the most is, hold on, sorry guys, let me look here. It's on Woodface. It's the second song on Woodface. So hold on a second here.
While you're looking, I love the first song on the Robbie Robertson solo record. Like, Lamois produced it, and Clearmountain mixed it. It was freaking amazing. Talk about depth. That thing has depth for miles.
Yeah, that's a really great record. If you listen to It's Only Natural or Fall at Your Feet, Weather With You, fucking beautiful. Four Seasons, One Wind Day, which we talked about. But listen to It's Only Natural, because that is really the deal.
Pete, depth, mastering, how?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million ways you can add depth in mastering, and it can be very subtle or extreme, but a lot of times it's just EQ. I think that especially I see online with people, kind of new people getting into mastering, everyone's concerned with a million processors and 6 different compressors and multi-band and MS and stuff. What they don't realize is professional mastering engineers that have been doing this for a long time, first of all, rarely ever do MS, rarely ever do multi-band processing, and barely compress anything, and still are able to add depth to the mixes. So, for instance, it's real easy if you want to bring the vocal out in a mix. Maybe you're doing a quarter dB or half a dB boost around, I don't know, 2K or something, or you're emphasizing the kick drum. Or if you're doing any compression, if I am using compression, I run most of my units in dual mono. So I'm able to give the mix just a little bit of depth.
Good trick.
If there's any stereo bass, sometimes you're going to fight with that. But good mixes, in my opinion, most good mixes don't have really panned wide sub-frequency stuff.
Okay, so this is what comes back to the beginning of this conversation that we had. When you're mixing on a desk, when you're using a lot of analog, everything is fucking random, right? So having something on the left being different from something on the right, even though it's the same, it's chaos. The chaos tends to make things wider and deeper than when you have something that's entirely in the box and all you're using are stereo plugins and everything's exactly the same on each side. So what you might want to do is start using mono plugins, start breaking stereo tracks into mono, doing slightly different EQs, messing around with the relationships and all of that, taking it off the linear phase EQ and using something that's going to phase shift because it will make things wider, it will make things deeper.
I've never used the linear phase EQ.
Never.
There you go.
I use the same digital EQ always, and I think it surprises people. I if I'm using digital EQ, which I do frequently, I use the
Is that the Weiss
Fab filter?
No, I don't use any of that Weiss stuff. I use the Fab Filter Pro Q3, and I use their de-esser, which is fucking brilliant.
So do I.
And I use Pro L2 for my limiter. The Pro L2 with a custom setting that I came up is 80% of my limiting. I use a handful of limiters, and generally, oftentimes I'll use different digital limiters on a record if that's the sound I'm going for. Sometimes I'll use the same exact limiter for the whole record. It really depends.
There you go.
Right, keep it simple,
Yep. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. I have a little secret. I will use the Fab Filter multiband on vocals all the time.
Well,
I do it all the time.
I want to qualify my multiband thing. I'll use a multiband limiter in single band mode for something specific. So, I might use it to help. With like pokey subs on a kick drum or something that just keeps jumping out. But I rarely use multiband more than one band, and when I do use multiband, even for that, it's pretty rare.
Vance, I totally agree with you on the vocal. You can use the low band to just duck the booms and the pops and like the muck, and the mid range to like tame some of that piercy stuff, and the high end to catch a few little S's and just kind of make it even. Like that plus soothe is amazing. Soothe is the shit. If you guys out there don't Soothe, you need to own it. It's one of the most useful plugins I've ever used in my life.
I'll tell you the great thing about Soothe. Soothe has made a lot of bad Pro Tools recordings better. Like people who are recording vocals like on girls, female vocals with a, bad 414 emulation or something. You know what I'm talking about.
The piercing right in the forehead, like, ow.
Yeah, the ice pick right here.
Yep.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, hey, Mark, are you out there? Because I know that I think time is wrapping up right now.
Yeah, we ran an hour over. Ran an hour over. I love it. It's Geek Out on Tuesday. What was it again?
Hey, Paul, I just saw what you posted. Soothe isn't cheap. You know what? Good, fast, and cheap. Pick two. These are tools that you're using for the rest of your life, and you have to pay a couple $100 for a plugin, and you can have it forever. That's not that bad. If you keep an eye out, there's a lot of plugins on sale. The trick is not to buy everything when it's on sale for $29. Buy the things that work really well and use them when you need them. I think about it. Almost all of the favorite records that we've had made used one EQ, 2 or 3 compressors, a couple of reverbs, and some delays, and that's it. You don't need 400 EQ plugins. You need one. one good one. You know, I mean, so just be judicious.
You know,
Soon
someone
worth
just mentioned something about about PSP plugins. I wanted to jump in on.
Man.
One of my dirty secrets: the PSP Vintage Warmer, when that thing works, is fucking awesome.
Killer.
So I did a record for a band called Panic at the Disco called "Death of a Bachelor." That's my final limiter on that record.
Great record. Really?
Wow.
The Vintage Warmer on that record?
It worked on that record. I mean, it was 95% of the processing is analog, but that worked as the final limiter over everything else, and it's what the producer liked the best. So
You know what? Who turned me on to PSP to Vintage Warmer? Richard Dodd.
Yeah.
Richard
Me too.
Dodd. Yeah.
Yep. When it works, it works.
Yeah, Anthony is he's a sweet dude, man. He's the tallest guy in audio.
That's awesome.
I don't know if do you guys
Same
know
with
the owner of PSP, Anthony? He's 7 foot tall.
Oh man.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah, he is easily 7 foot tall.
that's hysterical.
Yeah, it's a great
Awesome.
guy.
Mark, take it away.
Yeah, man. Pete, thank you for joining us. It was super fun.
Crash this thing.
Oh, it was great. We ran a poll about possibly doing a Puremix video with you, and the answers were yes and yes.
Yeah.
So cool. Thank you guys for doing this, and thanks everybody for watching. Tomorrow we're gonna be back.
Thanks everybody for watching. Reid and I are getting together some people to be on here. That's gonna be great. Pete's gonna be on here soon again as an actual guest, where we'll actually ask him a lot of like important, deep mastering questions.
Maybe he'll show us the lathe.
Maybe.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. There's the live camera of the lathe right there. And the other.
Oh wait, let me full screen you. Here we go. Hold on.
And I think, hey Vance, can we announce next week? Did we do that already?
I think we can.
Okay.
I'll take you in here while you're talking here.
Well, he's talking here.
Awesome. Yeah. Just tomorrow we're gonna be live again with Chris Shaw. Chris mixed a bunch of records that you guys own.
Chris Shaw rule.
We love Chris.
One of my favorite people in the whole world, man.
Me too.
One of my favorite people. And man, that guy's a fucking monster engineer. So
Yeah, he's
good.
That's going to be great. He's going to open up a Not a Surf Pro Tools session, and I'll be interviewing him. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That's at 2:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow.
Interview him when you ask him about the Super Furry Animals SACD surround mix.
Okay.
And then ask him about fucking Public Enemy, because he fucking did fucking Public Enemy.
Yeah.
Public Enemy. Nation of Millions.
Also,
back.
ask him about Bob Dylan changing studios in the middle of the evening. That's a really good one too.
All right, so next week, Between Two Beards, we're gonna have the other mastering engineer that has had more number ones than anyone else. Our brother from another mother down from Austin, Texas, a guy named Chris Athens.
Nicest guy in audio.
Hysterical. The best guy ever. So please join us for that. I guarantee you it's going to be a laugh riot.
Awesome.
Yeah, he called me during the show, so I'm getting ready to book him right now. So.
Yeah, and now that we've set him on air, he can't say no. So thanks for joining us. Cheers, fuckers.
Cheers, fuckers.
Cheers, fuckers.
Thanks, everybody.
I drank all my bourbon.
Yeah. Happy.
All right. Thanks, guys.